They didn't even look at me when I walked in. My stepmother, Gloria, sat in the middle of the long walnut table like a queen at court, her pearl earrings catching the light just enough to dazzle. She was smiling, too wide, too proud. Next to her, my half-brother Mason leaned back in his chair, hands folded behind his head, that smirk on his face like he'd already won something. Maybe he thought he had. I hadn't even taken a seat when she said it. "He loved me," Gloria said, her voice silky and sharp. "Not the child of his first mistake." She didn't even blink. Mason chuckled beside her. "She's not even in the paperwork," he added with a grin that made my stomach churn. The room erupted in soft laughter. Restrained, polite, the kind that pretends not to be cruel. I stood there, coat still on, purse clutched tight in my hand, like an outsider stepping into someone else's home. But it was my father's home once. Mine too, in another life. I took the only empty seat. At the far end of the table, the seat no one else wanted. My pulse thudded behind my ears. I scanned the faces around me. Lawyers in stiff suits, a few distant cousins, family friends who hadn't spoken to me since my mom passed. Everyone seemed comfortable, at ease, like they knew how this would go. I forced my expression into something resembling composure, even though my hands were shaking in my lap. I wasn't surprised Gloria was gloating. What surprised me was how confident she looked, like she had seen the future and already signed her name at the bottom of it. The lawyer, Mr. Granger, entered moments later. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe just tired. He carried a dark leather briefcase, the kind that clicks open like a gun being cocked. All eyes turned to him. Silence fell like a curtain. "Thank you all for coming," he said, setting the briefcase on the table. "As you know, we're here to read the last will and testament of Mr. Gerald Langston, my father. Or, the man who used to be my father. It had been years since we last spoke. Years since I walked out of his house after he told me he couldn't afford to hold on to the past anymore. That was what he called me. His past. A reminder of his first life, as he phrased it. The life with my mom. Gloria was his second wife, younger, perfectly poised. She made sure everyone knew she was the one who helped Gerald rebuild. She'd inserted herself into every photo, every story, every memory, until it felt like I had never existed at all. And Mason, her son, half my blood, none of my heart, had followed her lead with ease. I was always the other daughter, the shadow in the background. "Before I begin," Mr. Granger said, opening the briefcase, "I'd like to remind everyone that the contents of this reading are final and legally binding." Gloria leaned forward, lips pursed in anticipation. Mason elbowed her lightly, like it was a game they were about to win together. That's when Granger paused. Just for a second. A flicker of something passed across his face. Confusion, maybe, or surprise. He reached into the case and pulled out a sealed envelope. Thick, stamped, unmistakably recent. "Actually," he said, adjusting his glasses, "your father made an amendment to the will 3 weeks ago, after discovering the truth." The room stiffened. Gloria's smile faltered. Mason's brows furrowed. "What amendment?" Gloria snapped. "That's not possible. He was barely lucid at the end." Granger didn't respond to her tone. He just opened the envelope and removed a fresh stack of papers, each one bearing my father's unmistakable signature. "It's all here," he said calmly. "Signed, witnessed, legally executed." No one moved. No one breathed. I sat frozen at the end of the table, watching the color drain from Gloria's face. What truth? What could he have discovered so close to the end? I had come here expecting nothing. I was told I had nothing. And maybe that was true. But the look on Mr. Granger's face said otherwise. He wasn't looking at Gloria. He was looking at me. The room had gone silent, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. The kind that charges the air and makes you hyper-aware of every heartbeat, every breath. I sat at the edge of my seat, watching as Mr. Granger slowly removed the amended will from its envelope. Gloria's perfectly manicured nails tapped against the polished wood of the table. Tap, tap, tap. She wasn't smiling anymore. "This is absurd," she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Gerald wouldn't. He was too sick. He couldn't have done this." But he had. I could see it in the lawyer's face. In the slight tremble of his hand as he adjusted the papers, his eyes scanning lines he'd probably already read a dozen times. Whatever he saw in that will, it changed things. For all of us. "As I mentioned," Granger said calmly, "this amendment was signed 3 weeks ago in the presence of 2 witnesses and myself. Your father was of sound mind. He was deliberate and very specific." Mason scoffed. "Specific?" he repeated, leaning forward with that same smug grin. "Let me guess. He left his vinyl collection to the mailman and his car to the dog." But I saw the edge in his eyes. He was rattled. They both were. Gloria's hand was clenched now. Her tapping stopped. She was staring at Granger like he had betrayed her. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I sat still like I'd been taught to do when I was younger. Blend into the wallpaper, stay quiet, don't provoke. Only this time, I wasn't the one who had something to hide. "Before I continue," Granger said, flipping to the top page, "I need to verify something. Miss Langston, Samantha, can you come here for a moment?" It was like every head in the room turned at once. My chest tightened. I wasn't expecting that. I stood slowly, legs unsteady, feeling their eyes cling to me like wet fabric. I walked to the front of the room where Granger waited, holding out a small card. An old ID, my father's, from when I was a child. "Do you recognize this?" he asked. I nodded. "That's his old signature. He stopped using it after he remarried." Granger nodded as well, lips tightening. "That's what I thought." He turned the document around, letting me see the scrawled name at the bottom of the amendment. It was the signature I remembered from my childhood birthday cards. Slanted, messy, always a little too large. He had signed it with his old name. Gerald L. Langston. Not the stylized G.L. Langston Gloria insisted he use later in life. "He signed it with the name he used when your mother was alive," Granger added, quietly enough that only I could hear. My throat clenched. I stepped back, returning to my seat, heart hammering in my ears. Gloria's voice sliced through the air. "This is a trick. That signature, it proves nothing. He hadn't used that name in decades." "Exactly," Granger said, "which is why the sudden reappearance of it is significant." Mason leaned forward again, irritation creeping into his voice. "So what's in the will?" "If you're done with the dramatics, maybe we can finally hear what my father actually wanted." Granger gave him a long look before continuing. "Very well. As per the amended document dated 3 weeks prior to Mr. Langston's passing, I will now begin the reading." He cleared his throat and began. "To my wife, Gloria, I leave the sum of $10,000 and my sincere hope that she will find the peace she was always searching for." Gloria choked on her breath. 10,000? What?" The room rippled with stunned whispers. One of the cousins leaned in, whispering behind a hand. Another family friend coughed awkwardly. "To my stepson Mason," Granger continued, unshaken. "I leave my golf clubs and a framed photo of our first fishing trip. I regret we never truly connected." Mason's mouth fell open. "Are you kidding me?" His face flushed, eyes darting between the paper and his mother. He looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from under him. Granger went on, voice steady. "And to my daughter, Samantha Langston?" I stopped breathing. "The remainder of my estate, including the family home, all financial holdings, savings, retirement accounts, and my personal letters." I blinked. Once. Twice. Had I heard that right? Gloria stood up so fast her chair screeched backward. This is fraud. He wouldn't have done this. He couldn't have. But Granger didn't even flinch. He did, he said. And it's legal. Every word. Mason slammed a hand on the table. She was out of his life. She doesn't deserve anything. Gloria looked ready to throw something, but neither of them noticed that I hadn't spoken, that I hadn't smiled or cried or moved at all. Because something else was swirling in my chest. Something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Not victory, not vindication, just confusion. Why? Why would my father do this? We hadn't spoken in years. The last time I called, he let it ring. The last time I wrote, I never got a reply. So what changed? What truth had he found? 3 weeks before his death. And why? Why now? The reading was over, but the aftermath hung in the room like smoke. Gloria paced like a caged animal, her heels clicking too loudly against the hardwood floor. Mason had stormed out a few minutes earlier, slamming the heavy front door behind him so hard the walls trembled. Some of the extended family left in a wave of awkward silence and sidelong glances, clearly not sure whose side to take anymore. And me? I just sat there, still trying to understand what had happened. Not just what he gave me, but why? Mr. Granger began to organize the documents into neat stacks, avoiding my eyes, as if he already knew the questions waiting behind them. I waited until the room had emptied, leaving only the two of us. Then, quietly, why did he do it? He paused, fingers resting on the briefcase. I was hoping you'd ask. He walked to a side cabinet, pulled open a drawer, and retrieved a small, worn envelope. It was cream-colored, thick paper, the kind people don't use anymore. My name was written across the front in my father's handwriting. Sharp, decisive, unmistakable. He gave this to me the day he signed the amendment, Granger said, offering it to me. He told me not to show you until after everything was read. My hands trembled as I took it. There was no return address, no postmark. Just my name. Samantha. Not Sam, not Sweetie like he used to call me before things fell apart. Just my name. I didn't open it right away. I held it like it might burn me, like whatever was inside might tear open a wound I'd spent years sewing shut. Was he different that day? I asked. Granger nodded slowly. He was tired, but clear. He spoke about regrets, about time he couldn't get back. And then he said something I didn't understand until now. He looked at me. He said, "Truth doesn't erase pain, but it can rewrite the ending." That line stayed with me. Still does. I slipped the envelope into my purse, unable to face it just yet. The drive home felt like moving through water. Every red light gave me time to second-guess everything. His motives, my memory, even whether this was real. My phone buzzed on the seat next to me. Probably Mason or Gloria. Maybe both. I ignored it. My apartment felt smaller than usual when I stepped inside. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and stood in the hallway for a long moment, my coat still on, the envelope heavy in my purse. I finally sat on the edge of my bed, took it out, and opened it. The letter inside was handwritten. 4 pages. No date. Just his name signed at the bottom in the same shaky script from the will. Samantha, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it means I waited far too long to say the things I should have said in person. The first line alone made my throat tighten. I know I failed you. I didn't just lose your mother. I lost myself. And then I let Gloria tell me who I was supposed to be. I let her rewrite my life. And I let her turn me against you. I believed things that weren't true. I stopped reading. My hands clenched around the paper. What things? What lies had been told? What had he believed about me? I kept going. Years ago, Gloria told me you had taken money from me, that you were using my name to apply for loans. She showed me fake emails, bank printouts. She said you were trying to ruin me out of spite. My stomach dropped. I believed her. And I didn't ask you. I didn't even give you a chance to explain. I just decided I was done. I'm ashamed of that. I let pride take the wheel. And for that, I'm sorry. I sat frozen, heart pounding in my ears. I found out the truth a month ago. My old accountant called. He finally saw the discrepancies. Someone had been shifting money between accounts. Not you, Gloria. I covered my mouth with one hand. It was her all along. She told Mason, too, that you were a thief, that you were dangerous. I let her poison my memory of you. My body started to shake. I couldn't read anymore, but I forced myself to finish. So I changed the will, not out of guilt, but because it was the only thing I could still make right. I'm sorry it took me this long to see you. I hope one day you can forgive me. If not for who I was, then for who I tried to be at the end. Love always, Dad. I sat in the quiet of my room for a long time. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. He knew. He finally knew. All the years I'd spent wondering if he hated me, if he had chosen someone else over his own daughter. It wasn't just rejection. It was deception. But the damage had been done. And yet, he tried to undo it. At the very end, truth doesn't erase pain, but it can rewrite the ending. Now I had to decide what to do with the truth he left behind. And I had a feeling this wasn't the end of it. Because Gloria wasn't the kind of woman to lose quietly, and she sure as hell wouldn't go down without a fight. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I didn't try, but because my father's letter kept playing in my head like a broken record. The words felt too big to hold in one place. She told Mason, too. I believed her. I didn't even give you a chance. Grief has strange timing. You can bury someone, walk out of a funeral home, sit through a will reading, and still not fully feel it until you're alone with a letter that changes everything. By morning, my phone had 17 missed calls. 11 from Gloria, 4 from Mason, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. And then came the knock. It wasn't the kind of knock neighbors give. It was sharp, angry. I opened the door, already knowing who I'd see. Gloria stood there in her black designer coat, lips painted in that cold crimson she wore like armor. Her face was calm. Too calm, but her eyes were wildfire. You knew what you were doing, she hissed, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. You came to that will reading knowing what he'd done. I closed the door behind her slowly. No, I said, keeping my voice steady. I didn't know, but now I do. She laughed, bitter and breathless. You really think that letter changes anything? You think one pathetic apology at the end of his life gives you the right to take everything? I didn't answer, because it wasn't about taking anything. It was about finally being seen. She stepped closer, the scent of expensive perfume and venom thick in the air. You're not the victim here, Samantha. You were always weak, always waiting to be saved. That's why your mother left him. That's why he picked me. That line hit deeper than I wanted it to. And she knew it. She always knew exactly where to aim. You stole my son's future. She spat. No, I replied quietly. You did. When you lied to a dying man to get what you wanted. When you turned him against his own daughter. Her eyes narrowed. Don't act like some innocent little martyr. You walked away, remember? You cut us off. You left. I left, I snapped. Because you made that house feel like a war zone. Because I was tired of begging for scraps of love from a father too blind to see what was happening under his own roof. She went quiet at that. For a moment, the silence was almost human between us, and then she laughed again. You think this is over? She asked, taking a step back. You think you've won? I didn't come here to win, I said, voice low. I came because I was told I was still in the will. I didn't expect anything, but he gave it anyway. I'll fight it, she said. I have lawyers, connections. That man was not in his right mind, and I'll make sure a judge sees that. He was clearer than ever, I replied. He left receipts, letters, proof, and I've already handed copies to Granger. She paled, just for a second. That's when I realized she wasn't here to fight. She was here because she was afraid, not of me, but of the truth. She turned, heading for the door. "You'll regret this," she said. "All of it." "I already regret a lot," I said softly, "but not this." She slammed the door behind her, and just like that, the house was quiet again. The next day, I drove to the family home, the one I now legally owned. I hadn't been back there since I was 21. The last time I stood on that porch, my father told me I was making a mistake by leaving. He said I'd never find anything better than blood. He was wrong. The house looked exactly the same. White shutters, stone path, the same heavy wooden door that had once stayed shut while I cried on the front steps with a duffel bag at my feet. I stepped inside slowly. It was eerily clean. Too clean. Like no one had lived here for months. Just existed. Dust clung to the corners. A picture of Gloria and Mason still hung above the fireplace. Not a single photo of me anywhere. I walked through the hallway like I was walking through someone else's memory. And then I saw it. On the desk in my father's study, right beneath the antique lamp he used to love, a notebook. Worn leather cover. No label. No lock. I opened it. Page after page of my father's handwriting. Dates, observations, regrets. Saw Samantha's graduation photo in the paper. She looked so grown up. I wonder if she ever got my letter from 2014. Gloria says Samantha wants nothing to do with me. Hard to believe. Maybe she's right. Maybe I ruined it beyond repair. Tried to write her again. Couldn't find the words. Each entry felt like a stone added to my chest. He had tried, even if he didn't send them. Even if he didn't say it to my face. He thought about me. He missed me. Maybe that's not enough for some people. But for a girl who spent most of her 20s thinking she'd been erased, it meant everything. And as I stood in that house, alone, surrounded by proof that my father had finally seen me, I knew Gloria wasn't done. She would come back. She would fight. But this time, I wasn't the girl crying on the porch. I was the one holding the keys. 3 days after Gloria stormed out of my apartment, I got the envelope in the mail. Certified. Heavy paper. Her lawyer's name printed across the front in sleek black font. Notice of intent to contest the will. Of course. It didn't matter that the documents were signed, witnessed, notarized. It didn't matter that my father had left proof. Letters, even a video message Granger promised to reveal only if it came to trial. Gloria wouldn't go quietly. She was a woman who lived on control, and I had taken hers away. I sat on the edge of the couch, the envelope still open in my lap, my coffee going cold beside me. I wasn't afraid of her. Not anymore. But I was exhausted. Exhausted by the weight of all of it. The past. The lies. The memories that clung to the walls of that house like mold I couldn't scrub clean. And maybe I was afraid of what came next. That night I returned to the house again. Not because I needed to, but because I couldn't sleep unless I was surrounded by the pieces he left behind. His smell still lingered faintly. Old books, cedarwood, and ink. I walked back into his study, the notebook still sitting exactly where I'd left it. I hadn't read it all yet. Something in me was scared too. But now, knowing that Gloria was building a case against me, I needed to understand more. Not just what my father regretted, but what else he knew. Why now? Why really? The journal opened easily to the middle. My fingers stopped on a page with only a few lines, but the handwriting was different. Shakier. Uneven. August 3rd. Talked to Margaret again. She said the lab confirmed it. The timeline. It doesn't lie. I was wrong about everything. About who Samantha really is. I blinked. Lab? Timeline? I flipped forward. August 7th. I didn't want to believe it, but Margaret wouldn't lie. I kept the paternity results, sealed in the filing cabinet. If she's right, if what we think is true, then Mason isn't. The rest of the sentence was scribbled out, ink dug into the page like he couldn't bear to finish it. I stared at the words, trying to piece them together. Margaret. That was his old secretary. She retired years ago, but I remembered her. Sharp as a tack, always quiet, always watching. I had no idea they still spoke. Paternity results? I stood up, suddenly needing air. I paced the room, eyes scanning every shelf, every drawer. Then I remembered. The filing cabinet. Bottom drawer. The one that always stuck. It took everything I had to pull it open. But there it was. A thin manila envelope, unmarked except for a single word. Confidential. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were two things. First, a printed lab report. I scanned the lines, heart hammering louder with each word. DNA analysis? 2 samples. One labeled ML, the other GL. Conclusion: no biological relationship found. I swallowed hard. Mason wasn't my father's son. He never had been. I sat down slowly, the room tilting just slightly. Every memory I had of Gloria parading Mason around like the perfect heir, every time my father brushed me aside to praise his son, it all snapped into a new, brutal clarity. He didn't know. Not until the very end. And when he did, he rewrote everything. My breath caught. The second item in the envelope was a letter. Sealed. No address. Just the word. For Mason. It wasn't open. I didn't read it. I couldn't. But just holding it in my hands made something in my chest shift. Because now I understood. This wasn't just about regrets. This was about truth. The kind that explodes quietly but leaves nothing untouched. The next day, I met with Mr. Granger. I handed him both the DNA results and the sealed letter. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he said nothing until he'd read the full report. I see, he said slowly. Well, this changes the landscape. Can she still contest it? I asked. He hesitated. She'll try. But if this information becomes part of the record, her entire claim will fall apart. The will was amended based on a discovery your father documented. That discovery proves that the primary heir Gloria insisted on was never legally his child. There's no bloodline, no legal standing. I let the silence hang there. Granger leaned back in his chair. It's up to you whether this becomes public, he added. Your father didn't include this in the legal documentation, only in the notebook. Perhaps he hoped it wouldn't need to come to this. Maybe, I said softly. But Gloria's made it clear she won't stop. He nodded. Then I'd advise we file it under sealed evidence, only released if the case proceeds. I agreed, but inside, I was torn, because I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to humiliate Mason or even Gloria. I just wanted to be free of them, of their poison, of the years they stole. But if they wanted to take this to court, they were going to lose. Not because I wanted them to, but because the truth always wins eventually, even if it takes years to find its voice. The court date never came, not because Gloria backed down willingly, but because her lawyer did. 2 weeks after I handed Mr. Granger the DNA results and my father's sealed letter, her attorney requested a meeting. According to Granger, once he reviewed the documents and saw the signatures, dates, and corresponding entries in my father's notebook, he advised Gloria to let it go. But Gloria didn't. She sent one last message, a letter, handwritten, no apology, no remorse. Just a single line. You stole everything. But don't think for a second you earned it. I didn't reply, because I didn't need to prove anything to her. Not anymore. The house didn't feel like mine yet. It still whispered with voices from another life. His voice, her perfume, Mason's laughter echoing down the hallways. But slowly I began to make changes. I took down the pictures over the fireplace, boxed up old trophies, framed articles, anything that felt like a monument to someone else's story. And in their place, I added pieces of my own. A photo of Mom and me at the lake. A bookshelf filled with my favorite novels, dog-eared and stained with time. A painting I made in college that Dad once called too abstract to be art. I hung it in the entryway. I think he would have smiled now if he saw it. Weeks passed, then a month. And just when I started to feel like maybe this chapter was over, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Samantha? It was a woman's voice, soft, slightly raspy. Familiar. Yes? This is Margaret, your father's former secretary. My heart kicked. He asked me not to contact you directly, she said. He wanted to leave space, but after reading what you found, I think you deserve to know everything. I drove to meet her the next morning. She lived in a small brick house on the edge of town, surrounded by roses and silence. She welcomed me in with tea, then handed me a small cloth-bound folder. Inside were copies of emails, financial reports, calendar appointments, things she'd quietly collected over the years. I kept these because I saw what was happening, she said. But your father wouldn't hear it. Not then. As I flipped through the pages, the pattern became clear. Gloria had been slowly draining money from various accounts, reallocating assets, redirecting funds, even rerouting business income into private holdings under Mason's name. She hadn't just manipulated him emotionally, she had nearly destroyed him financially. He only began to question it last year, Margaret explained, when one of the properties he thought he owned was listed under someone else's trust. He came to me in a panic. That's when I told him everything. And the DNA test? He asked me to help him coordinate it. He didn't want to confront Gloria until he was sure. The day the results came in, he just sat there, quiet, staring at the paper. Did he cry? I asked. She shook her head. But he looked like a man who'd been holding his breath for 20 years. And finally exhaled. After I left her house, I didn't drive home right away. I stopped at the cemetery. It was raining, soft and steady. The kind of rain that doesn't chase you indoors, but invites you to linger. I stood by his headstone, fingers brushing the grooves of his name. Gerald Langston, beloved husband. Devoted father. I used to think that second line was a lie. Now, I think it was just incomplete. I got your letter, I whispered. And I believe you. I knelt, pulling a folded note from my coat. My own words this time. Just a few. You were wrong, but you tried to make it right. And that matters. We can't rewrite the past. But I'm learning how to live with the truth. Thank you for seeing me. Love, Samantha. I tucked the note into the base of the stone beneath a small rock, and I let the rain wash the rest away. A few days later, I got another letter. This one wasn't from Gloria. It was from Mason. I don't know what to say, it began. I didn't know about any of it. I believed her. I believed everything she told me about you. Maybe that makes me weak. Maybe it makes me guilty. I don't expect forgiveness, but if you ever want to talk, I'm here. I didn't write back. Not yet, because I still didn't know what I wanted to say. But I folded the letter gently, placed it in the same drawer where I now kept my father's journal. Maybe one day I'd reply. Maybe not. But what I did know was this. I wasn't the child of a mistake. I was the daughter of a man who, at the very end, chose truth over pride. And I had survived more than anyone ever gave me credit for. If you've ever been erased, overlooked, or made to feel like your truth didn't matter, just know this. You are not invisible. And even if it takes years, the truth has a way of finding its way to light.